G'day everyone, it's Luke here from Astro Awakening, and I'm going to do a long video today on Chiron. At the moment in the sky, Mars is opposing Chiron, and when we have a planetary alignment as such, it can tend to trigger the Chiron in our natal charts. And through my own discovery and research into Chiron, as well as what I see day to day in my one-on-one consultations, I've come to a bit of a perspective that I'd like to share with you, and hopefully whether you're new to astrology or if you're an existing astrologer or a professional astrologer, my perspective might be able to help you better understand it and know how to deal with Chiron in natal chart, as well as what to do when you're doing consultations if that's your thing. So before we get into Chiron, if we think of all of the inner planets, the 7 traditional planets, right up until Saturn, so the Sun, Moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars, and Jupiter, they're all operating at a conceptual level of reality. And we are sort of aware of the function of those. We're aware of how our mind thinks, how we communicate, and how our thoughts are collected. And that's a function of Mercury in your natal chart. Right up until Saturn. Saturn's like the point where we solidify conceptual reality. So it's like that's the limit, and all of the functions operate within the limit of Saturn. Now the problem with that is when things harden and become fixed into a reality or materialize, that's also the end of them. It's death. As we're born into a body, we die spiritually to be born into human, and we die human to be born back into spiritual. So anything that comes into physical existence, where we can conceive of it through our physical senses, so it's got form, is no longer living. It's dead. It's reached the end of its life, if you like. So it has to then at some point break down. Nature's way is to break that down into its base elements, so it can be reabsorbed into nature and reused. So it's energy that's been broken down, right? So if our consciousness is operating at the level of Saturn, and all of the functions that we have are operating up until Saturn, the problem with that is we become stuck and we become rigid. Now, if you're not consciously evolving and awakening, that's fine. You can stay in your world, and some people live in that comfort zone all their life. However, for us souls that are awakening and we're raising our conscious level and our consciousness, and we're trying to awaken ourselves and find our true potential and our true purpose here, if you like, we are butting up against Saturn. And Saturn's creating this limit. It's like this block that we can't go past that. Interesting to note that in the last 250 years, humanity's got to a point where it needed to transform in order to raise consciousness, and it needed to do that rapidly. So we had the discovery, even though mythologically we've known about them for longer, we had the discovery in the last 250 years of the outer or transformational planets, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. And they work on breaking down Saturn's form. Uranus does it through sudden inspirational revelation. It's like the lightning bolt or the light switch that goes on. Neptune does that through the disillusion of the boundaries, so the desire to escape, to avoid, to merge with oneness into seeing everything as one, and I'm connected to that. And Pluto, if you haven't got the message through the first 3 levels of transformation, Pluto comes along and it's the slowest moving outer planet. And it works on deep rooted subconscious behavioral patterns and dysfunctional patterns and emotional behavioral patterns as well. What it does is it tends to slowly amp up some sort of emotional crisis for you that eventually you are unaware of what's going on, or why you're feeling a certain way, or why something's happening, and it's like putting the lid on a volcano, and eventually bang, there's some sort of crisis that happens within your life, and that's usually through plutonic energy, because you're trying to break down form, Saturn's form. You've got the revelation but haven't acted on it. You've desired to escape but haven't been able to embody that. So Pluto comes along and says, well, you're not getting the fucking message. So kaboom, and there's transformation through the process of crisis normally. This brings us to Chiron. Now Chiron, if you know a little bit about astrology, you go, oh, it's the wounded healer. So I just wanted to do a video today on breaking down Chiron from my perspective to help understand the symbolism and how we can merge myth and the discovery of the actual planetoid or comet or whatever you like to call it, how we can merge the two of those to get a better level of understanding that can help us, pierce into like the function of Chiron and what it is doing within our natal charts. So let's look at the mythology, if you like. Chiron is a centaur, which is horse bottom and man on top. So it gives that symbolism of being animal and human, or spiritual. So it's like the animal forces and the spiritual forces. Chiron was a gifted teacher and a healer. He gifted in the art of healing, astrology, medicine, hunting, and prophecy. So they're bearing in, and we'll come back to these. So, just hold in your mind now that, okay, it's a centaur, it's half animal, half human. It's a teacher, right? So it wants to give, it wants to teach, it wants to help. It's a healer, a naturally gifted healer, so it can heal people. It's astrologer as well, which we all should be our own astrologer. Now, he was wounded by a poisonous arrow from the Hydra, and he was unable to heal himself, right? So there was in the mythology of Chiron, he was wounded, and that was a mortal wound. He wasn't able to heal himself. He was supposed to have immortality, but he gave that up to save Prometheus in the underworld, and Prometheus is like our Pluto, so that light could be brought to humanity. And if you think of light, which is fire, right? They say fire, so that humans could use the use of fire. Well, fire is the will, but it's also light, and light is consciousness. It's like, Pluto was the last sort of Prometheus, Pluto, if you like, was the last of the gods that was able to save and sacrifice to bring light to humanity. So it's like through the final process of transformation, we can find our light. And when he gave up his immortality and died, his half-brother Zeus, or Jupiter, felt pity on him and put him amongst the constellations put him in the stars, the constellation of Centaur, in the constellation of Sagittarius. So that's where the home of Chiron is, if you like. Now, if we move on to the discovery of Chiron, was discovered in 1977, and it's an asteroid / comet / planetoid that sits between Saturn and Uranus. So in the orbit of Saturn and Uranus. And it's got a 51-year strange elliptical type orbit that sometimes it spends up to 7 or 8 years in a sign, and sometimes only a year or so in a sign. So it's got this strange, but it lives between Saturn and Uranus. So it's right between conceptual reality, the way things are, physical reality, and the way we conceive of things, material world, and it sits between that and the first of the transformational planets. And it orbits in between those, and it sort of crosses over Saturn's and it crosses over Uranus's orbit, if you like. So, if we come back now and we sort of start looking at the symbolism behind all of these things, if we come back to the animal-human thing, it goes to show you that Chiron gives us an ability to raise from animal level consciousness to human or divine level consciousness. Because if you think human in this mythological sense, or man, is seen as like the spiritual man, and to depict us in our lower form, or consciousness at a lower level, lower vibrational, instinctual, if you like, they depict that as being an animal. So if you're an animal, you're just instinctual, you're operating from instincts. You're not raising consciousness to like the intellect level or beyond. So the half horse, half man shows that Chiron holds there some symbolism for us to be able to raise from lower instinctual levels to higher spiritual levels. He was a teacher, right? And, there's a saying, those that can't do teach. And he was wounded. And it's like, okay, if we add those two things together, a wounded teacher, right? So there's this function that happens with Chiron in your chart that, yes, it does signify some sort of emotional wounding. And it's not that you can't heal yourself, it's usually that you're not consciously aware that you are wounded, or that the dysfunctional emotional pattern or operation that you're operating from is even a wound. It's like, oh, I didn't even know that that was a dysfunctional thing. It's like this unawareness. So what tends to happen is there's a projection of that out, and you will then discover the same wound in other people. And through seeing and perceiving that in others, and helping them with it self-worth or self-belief or hope or faith or whatever it might be, that wound that they've got, that you're like, hey, I can help you with that. It's like you will become their teacher. And in teaching and helping them heal their wound, you in turn help to heal your own wound. And it's like how you become consciously aware that you even had a wound to begin with. The next part of the symbolism is that he was placed in the constellation of Sagittarius, which is ruled by Jupiter. So Jupiter has rulership over Centaurus, which is the constellation. The ruling planet of Sagittarius, it's in the constellation of Sagittarius. The ruling planet of Sagittarius is Jupiter. So that shows us that significations of Jupiter are another way which we can help use the Chiron function, which is to heal our wounds. It's to help teach and heal others as well. And what are those sort of things? Well, they're benevolence, which is, kindness. They're joy, a sense of idealism, like a brighter future, a bigger picture, that there is spiritual meaning behind things. And if we apply that type of energy towards the healing process of ourselves and others, it's like, well, firstly, be kind to yourself, be kind to others. Bring joy. Don't forget to have joy. Jupiter's the jovial one. It's like the Jupiter is the lucky planet, where you have fortune and opportunity that are bestowed upon you, the riches of the gods, if you like. It's where you have spiritual vision as well. So it's like those energies can be used to help heal where Chiron has wounded you, and where it wounds others, and where you're going to heal and teach them as well. If we now look at the symbolism behind the discovery of it, so it's a planetoid, comet, asteroid, whatever. It's not an actual planet. So therefore, if all the planets have some sort of significant psychological function within astrology, and this is not a planet, it goes to show that it doesn't have a function as such. It's not that that's something that is it's real and it's there, but it's not got a purpose in as such that it's not like how I think or how I feel or what I like. It's like there's a part of you that's being wounded somehow, that's maybe deep psychological wounding, maybe it's emotional wounding, and it's distorted, if you like, your view on your Saturn reality. So the other thing is, it was discovered, if you like, in 1977, showing us that the generation born from then and onwards, it's not that people prior to that weren't healing and didn't have wounds. It's just that now into human consciousness from 77 onwards, the generations, that's going to be more of a conscious awareness around this part of ourselves that is wounded. And I'll tie this in, if you like, as we go through. It has a strange orbit, so it suggests that it's spending more time in some signs than others, showing us that different periods of time in humanity's conscious evolution, there are different aspects of our psychological makeup that need some wounding to be healed. It's like there's dysfunction there. So it spends longer sometimes in Aries, let's say, where assertiveness. So collectively, we've got to work on the ability to assert ourselves without being aggressive, with being compassionate, but being assertive and not compromising our will. And the next thing is it's where it sits in, cosmology or astronomy is between Saturn and Uranus. So the way we would sort of look at this is, there's Saturn with our conceptual reality. There's where our limit is. We've conceived of things and now this is the reality that we have. That's fine, but consciousness will get to that point and it wants to continue to evolve or to enlighten, to awaken, and it can't. So it's sitting between that reality and the first of the transformational planets, which is Uranus, the insight and the revealer. right? And it's like, it shows you that you can still experience transformation or the functions of those outer planets, but to really embody them and to really work on the positive side of transformation and really to raise your consciousness and your awareness and to awaken, you really need to use Chiron as the bridge between those. It's like, if you're going through the Uranian or Neptunian, Plutonian type crises or disillusion or revelation, and you're having those, but you're not integrating it into your reality, it's like, because the part of that that's missing is the Chiron, which is the bridging point. It's like, yeah, I'm having all those revelations, but you haven't healed that part of yourself. You haven't got to that deep wound in yourself yet and healed that to allow that transformation to take place. And generally what will happen is transformation will continue to push into your life through sudden change or the desire to escape or some sort of crisis. It's because you're now consciously aware, okay, there's transformation, but I get stuck and I keep coming back to Saturn, which is fear-based, which is the reality I'm in. It's like, I'm just stuck at this level. It's like Chiron is, and this brings me to one of my last points, is the symbol, the glyph of Chiron is a key. It's shaped like a key. And it sort of shows you in that symbolism itself that it holds the key to transformation, right? The centaur, half animal, instinctual level of humanity, to the spiritual level. Right there in centaur or in Chiron the centaur, and shaped like the key, is the symbolism of our ability to unlock our true potential and raise our awareness and our consciousness and work on the positive side of the transformational planets. And I'm a victim of this myself, because I've been on a spiritual path now since 2015 and doing spiritual practice and meditation, but I still haven't quite got to Chiron's wound, and it still raises its ugly head. In my Chiron's in Taurus. Now, at the end of this video, if you want to pause it, I'm going to put a little breakdown of Chiron in the different astrological signs, starting back from as early as 1951 right through to today, and showing you just a little breakdown of just sign-related Chiron only. So, more interpretation can be gathered if you look at the house placement in your chart. But for a generational or period groups within generations, just by looking at Chiron in the sign that it was in. For me, I have Chiron in Taurus. Taurus rules values, things of values, possessions, our own self-worth, things of worth, right? And Chiron represents the wound. And what have I got? The self-worth thing, the self-belief, the doubt, the negative, the critical, it's in my sixth house. Sixth house is naturally sort of Virgo's domain. So I'm overly critical of who? Me. And that raises the self-doubt and the low self-worth. So I hope this has been helpful to you. Chiron is, Mars is opposing Chiron now, and martial energy tends to activate things. There's a good chance that Chiron's, once it's activated in the sky, it can activate your Chiron in your chart. So you might sense that there is some sort of little bit of sore point that's come up, maybe in an interaction with a male, maybe a confrontation with a friend, maybe, Mars is going to be it's opposing it in the sign of relationships, which is Libra. So it's like maybe within a relationship, there's a little wound to come up. Try to see it for what it is. And if it's feeling of uncomfort and discomfort, rather than projecting it out and pushing it out or repressing that, try to sit with that and be like, where does this come from? Where does this really come from? Now, there is this, we can go back and go, oh, it's because dad didn't love me or mum didn't, whatever. But at the end of the day, we can't look and become a victim of the way we were raised, because our parents were doing the best they could with what they thought were the best of the tools that they had at their time based on their raising of, how they were raised. But, coming back to 1977, Chiron is discovered. It's like from now on, the generations, we don't become victims of that anymore. We stop the hereditary dysfunction and we do the healing, so that generations to come, we've already done our healing and we don't pass that dysfunction or that heal or all those wounds on, and it's not this perpetual cycle. It's like this has been brought into our awareness now. Chiron is part of astrology. It's part of your chart. get to know the Chiron in your chart, get to know the Chiron in other people's charts, you know, research a little bit into it, what it means in the signs and the houses. I'll leave a little bit at the end of this video. If you've got any questions, reach out. If you like this video, please hit the like button. This is a new channel. This is only my second video. There's more to come. Thanks for watching. See you soon.